Snow drifts across a quiet Midwestern street as Rosie, a burnt-out nursing student, unlocks a dark, undecorated house that should be glowing for Christmas. No tree, no laughter. Just a note. Her parents used her $10,000 student loan for a surprise cruise. Betrayal burns, until Grandma Eleanor, as sharp as winter air, whispers, "We fight back." Locks change. Evidence stacks. A silver-haired army assembles. When the sunburned family returns, they meet a new Rosie, steady, unshakable, demanding accountability at the door. Consequences replace carols. Boundaries become a lifeline. And somewhere between heartbreak and courage, a family learns what love looks like when respect finally enters the room. The drive from Chicago to Springfield was always long, but this time it felt different. My little Honda Civic was packed with carefully wrapped gifts, a tin of cookies I had baked between finals, and a thermos of strong coffee that kept me awake through the pre-dawn darkness. 6 hours of highway stretched before me, but all I could think about was the warm chaos waiting at home. Christmas had always been my anchor. Even during the worst financial years, my parents still managed to fill the house with lights, the smell of Mom's sugar cookies, Dad humming off-key carols, and my siblings arguing over who got the bigger slice of pie. For a few days every year, the Wilson house transformed into something magical. And this year, after months of grueling nursing school clinicals, I needed that magic more than ever. I imagined the scene the entire drive, Mom in the kitchen wearing her holiday apron, Dad with a football game blaring too loud on the TV, Jacob sprawled on the couch pretending not to care, Olivia fussing over her makeup in the hallway mirror, and Grandma Eleanor knitting in her favorite recliner. The Christmas tree would be glowing in the corner, gifts tucked neatly underneath. It would feel like coming home. But when I pulled into our driveway that evening, nothing looked right. The Hendersons across the street had their usual over-the-top light display, glowing reindeer prancing across the lawn. The Patels next door had framed their porch in twinkling icicles. Our house? Dark. No wreath on the door, no garland on the windows. Just Dad's Buick sitting alone in the driveway. A knot formed in my stomach. Maybe they'd had some kind of emergency, maybe they were waiting to surprise me. I clutched my bags of gifts, trudged up the snowy front walk, and opened the door. Silence. The living room was bare, no tree, no stockings. No garland on the staircase. The smell wasn't cookies or pine. It was the faint scent of microwave leftovers. My heart sank. In the kitchen, dear, came a voice, warm but weary. It was Grandma Eleanor. She was sitting at the table, wearing her everyday house dress, picking at a plate of reheated turkey and stuffing. No candlelight, no holiday sparkle, just my grandmother and a lonely dinner. "Grandma, where is everyone? Where's the tree?" I asked, my voice shaky. Her eyes, lined with 82 years of life, flickered with something I couldn't name, part anger, part shame. She gestured toward the refrigerator. "See for yourself." There, pinned under a souvenir magnet, was a piece of paper torn from a notepad. Mom's handwriting, little hearts dotting the I's like it was a love letter. "Rosie, sweetie, last-minute amazing deal on a Caribbean cruise. Couldn't pass it up. Used your loan money. Consider it our family Christmas gift. Back in 4 days. Please take care of Grandma. Love you! Mom, Dad, Jake, Liv, XOXO. I read it once. Then again, my brain refused to process the words. My loan money? My $10,000 student loan, the one I had carefully saved for my final semester of nursing school? Gone. Spent. On a cruise. My phone buzzed. A notification. I opened Instagram and nearly dropped it. A photo. My family, all 4 of them, standing on the deck of a cruise ship wearing layers, tropical drinks in hand. The caption, "Surprise Christmas vacation, so blessed." The room spun. I clutched the counter to steady myself. My legs felt weak. 4 years of relentless hard work, balancing jobs and classes, scrimping every dollar so I could graduate debt-free, and they had stolen it in a heartbeat. I looked at Grandma, her fork resting untouched now, her expression calm but tight. They really did this," I whispered. "Yes, Rosie," she said firmly. "They did, and we're gonna fix it." Those words hit me harder than the note, harder than the Instagram post. My family had betrayed me in the most casual, thoughtless way possible. But Grandma wasn't crying. She wasn't panicking. She was already planning. I didn't know it then, standing in that undecorated kitchen with tears stinging my eyes, But this would be the Christmas that changed everything. The year I finally stopped being the family doormat. The year Grandma and I joined forces. And 4 days later, when my family came home sunburned and smiling, it would be me waiting for them, with new locks on the doors and consequences they never saw coming. I stood in that undecorated kitchen, the crumpled note in my hand, feeling like the ground had vanished beneath me. $10,000. My $10,000. Not a lottery win, not extra savings, but a carefully secured student loan meant for one purpose only, to carry me through my final semester of nursing school. The cruel casualness of the words burned in my mind. Consider it our family Christmas gift, as if it were nothing. As if my years of working 3 jobs, sacrificing sleep and social life, eating instant ramen just to keep my bills paid, were a piggy bank they could smash open for their holiday fun. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, logged into the account. The screen confirmed what I already feared. Drained. $9, $876, transferred to a travel agency 3 days earlier. They hadn't even left me a single dollar. My chest tightened. I tried calling Dad. Straight to voicemail. Mom. Same. Jacob. Olivia. Nothing. But Instagram was alive with their laughter. Jacob ziplining through a jungle. Olivia with a dolphin. Mom in a straw hat holding a drink with a tiny umbrella. Dad grinning wide at a captain's dinner. Each photo was another knife. I sank into a chair across from Grandma. They ruined me, I whispered. Without that money, I can't graduate. I can't sit for my boards. I can't be a nurse. Grandma's eyes softened, but there was steel there too. Rosie, listen to me. They've always taken from you. This time, it's bigger, but it's not the first time. Her words cracked something open. Memories rushed back like floodwaters. When I was 16, I had saved $800 from my part-time library job to buy a laptop for school. Dad asked to borrow the money for an investment opportunity. He never gave it back. My college fund, supposed to be my nest egg from birth, was nearly empty when I graduated high school. Mom admitted later they'd used it for vacations, a kitchen remodel, even to buy Jacob a used car. Then came the car I bought myself after 2 summers of waiting tables. Dad borrowed it constantly, until one day he returned it with the transmission shot. Repairing it cost me more than the car itself. His promise to pay never materialized. Jacob once begged me for $500 for textbooks, swearing he'd pay me back in 2 weeks when his financial aid cleared. 3 months later, after I had already maxed out my credit card to buy my own books, he finally shoved the money back at me like it was an afterthought. And Olivia, my sweet little sister, used my credit card, swearing it was for art supplies. It wasn't. It was for concert tickets. Each time I forgave them. Each time I told myself it was family. That family sacrifices for one another. But sitting there in that silent kitchen, the weight of it all pressed down until I could hardly breathe. They've always done this, I muttered, half to myself. Always. And I always let it go. Grandma nodded slowly, and they've done it to me too. I looked at her, startled. She told me about how Dad had convinced her to sell her house years ago, promising she'd have her own cozy den here. Most of the money had disappeared into their credit card debt. Her Social Security checks often went missing before she could deposit them. Even her jewelry had gradually vanished, her wedding ring among them, during tight months when my parents were scrambling for cash. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, horrified. She gave me a small, weary smile. For the same reason you didn't. Because love makes us blind. Because we hope next time will be different. Because it hurts too much to admit the people we love can hurt us this way. I stared at her, my throat tight. It wasn't just me. It had never been just me. My family had been bleeding both of us dry for years, and we had both stayed silent. And now, silence had nearly cost me everything I had worked for. Tears burned my eyes, but they weren't the same helpless tears from earlier. This time, they came with anger, with clarity, with something that felt dangerously close to resolve. They can't get away with this, I said, my voice firmer now. Grandma reached across the table and took my hand. No, Rosie, they can't. Not this time. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her eyes clear and determined. Love without limits creates monsters, she said softly. I made that mistake with your father. You don't have to make it too. The words lodged in my chest. I had spent years telling myself love meant sacrifice, forgiveness, patience. Maybe it did, but not like this. Not when the people I loved used it as an excuse to strip me of everything I worked for. I wiped my eyes, sat up straighter, and looked at Grandma. "So what do we do?" She smiled, small but fierce. "We fight back." And for the first time in years, I believed we actually could. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and something sweet baking. For half a second, I let myself believe the nightmare had been just that, a bad dream. But when I padded into the kitchen, still in my pajamas, reality came crashing back. There was Grandma Eleanor, not in her usual housecoat, but dressed sharply in one of her pantsuits, hair neatly combed, makeup applied. At 82, she looked like she was preparing for battle. On the table before her was my laptop, surrounded by a scattering of notebooks and printed documents. A tray of fresh cinnamon rolls cooled on the counter. "You're up," she said briskly without looking up from the screen. "Coffee's fresh. Grab some and join me." I blinked at her, still groggy. "Grandma, what's going on?" She finally looked up, her eyes clear and determined behind her glasses. "I've been working since 5, planning." "Planning what?" I asked warily, pouring myself coffee. "Operation Consequence," she replied, dead serious. I nearly choked on my drink. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" she said, arching one perfectly penciled eyebrow. Then she turned the laptop toward me. To my shock, she had created a detailed spreadsheet with color-coded tabs: finances, legal, timeline, resources. "You did all this?" I asked, half stunned, half impressed. She sniffed. "I've been taking computer classes at the community center for years. Don't underestimate me." I laughed weakly. "Guess not. But Grandma, I don't think there's anything we can do. They spent the money. It's gone." She leaned forward, her voice firm. "There's always something we can do. Maybe not easy, maybe not comfortable, but there is always a way forward. What matters is whether you're strong enough to take it." Her words lit something inside me. For the past 24 hours, I had felt like a victim. Powerless, robbed, betrayed. But here was my grandmother, who had been exploited even longer than I had, sitting upright with fire in her eyes, already plotting a counterattack. "Okay," I said slowly, "so what's the plan?" She tapped the first tab labeled Finances. "First, I have a small savings account. Not a fortune, but enough to cover your immediate tuition if needed. You'll pay me back with interest when your family repays you." "Grandma, I can't." "You can," she interrupted sharply, "and you will. This isn't charities, this is a bridge loan. I won't let their recklessness ruin your future." The second tab, Legal. I called Terry, my friend from church, retired attorney. "She's already drafting a repayment agreement. If your parents refuse, we'll pursue legal channels. Unauthorized use of student loan funds can trigger federal investigations. That alone should get their attention." I swallowed hard. Grandma wasn't playing. The third tab, Timeline. She had mapped out each day until my family returned. Day 1, change the locks, document the condition of the house, secure valuables. Day 2, prepare the repayment agreement. Day 3, emotional prep and role play. Day 4, confrontation. "Role play?" I asked incredulously. "Yes," she said firmly. "You know your father, bluster and guilt. Your mother, tears and excuses. Jacob, minimizing. Olivia, deflecting. They'll try every trick. We'll practice your responses until you're unshakable." She flipped to the final tab. Resources. Names filled the list. Martin, retired locksmith. Beth, retired social worker. Terry, the attorney. And half her bridge club, apparently ready to act as witnesses. "Grandma," I whispered, staring at her, This is like an army." She smiled faintly. "Elderly does not mean powerless. We've lived long enough to know how to fight smart. And Rosie, this time, you won't be fighting alone." I sat back, stunned. For years I had carried the weight of my family's mistakes alone. And now, finally, someone was stepping up beside me. But a flicker of doubt nagged at me. What if I can't do it? What if I cave like I always do? Grandma reached across the table, her thin hand surprisingly strong as it gripped mine. "You can, you will, because this time I'll be right there with you. And I have 82 years of practice at being stubborn." I couldn't help but laugh through the tears that had welled in my eyes. That day, we put the plan into motion. Martin came by mid-morning, changing every lock on the house and installing a keypad entry system. "Temporary code for now," he explained, showing me how to reprogram it. "You decide who gets permanent access." The symbolism wasn't lost on me. For the first time, I had control. In the afternoon, Terry stopped by with a thick folder. Inside was the repayment agreement, comprehensive, legally binding, with clear consequences for non-payment. "They may bluster, but this puts you in a position of strength," she said. Meanwhile, Beth coached us through emotional scenarios, playing my mother with unnerving accuracy. "Sweetie, after all we've sacrificed for you, how could you treat us this way?" she wailed, fake tears streaming. I practiced answering calmly, firmly. "This isn't about past sacrifices. This is about the $10,000 taken without permission." We spent the evening rehearsing different outcomes. By the time I went to bed, my heart still ached, but something else was there too: resolve. Lying in my childhood bedroom, I realized that the girl who had once cried herself to sleep over unpaid debts and broken promises was gone. Tomorrow, my family would return, sunburned and smiling, expecting the old Rosie who would forgive, forget, and pick up the pieces. But this time, they'd meet someone different. Someone who finally knew her worth. Someone armed with Grandma's wisdom and Operation Consequence. And they would never see it coming. The 4 days leading up to my family's return were unlike any Christmas I had ever known. Instead of baking cookies and wrapping presents, Grandma Eleanor and I spent our time locking down the house, rehearsing strategies, and building what she liked to call an iron wall of boundaries. Every day had its checklist. By the second morning, the locks were changed, the valuables photographed and stored safely, and every shred of evidence, from the drained student loan account to the printed cruise itinerary, was organized neatly in folders. The refrigerator, once depressingly empty, was stocked with basics that Grandma and I paid for ourselves. On the third day, we focused entirely on what Grandma called emotional armor. "They'll come at you with guilt, tears, and anger," she warned as we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. "You need to respond with clarity, calm, and conviction." So we practiced, over and over. Grandma role-played as my father, pounding the table and barking, "I'm the head of this household. You don't tell me what to do." I answered evenly, "This isn't about control, it's about accountability. You signed an agreement when you took my money. Now there are consequences." She switched gears, suddenly adopting my mother's quivering voice. "Sweetheart, we just wanted one nice thing as a family. We were always going to pay you back." I steadied my breath. "If you meant to pay me back, you wouldn't have hidden it. Families don't steal from each other." Finally, she became Jacob, shrugging and muttering, "It's over, Ross. The money's gone. Stop making drama." I met her eyes firmly. "It's not over until every dollar is repaid. That's not drama. That's reality." The exercises felt ridiculous at first, but by the end of the day, I was answering with strength instead of hesitation. I could almost feel the old patterns loosening their grip on me. That night, as we sipped chamomile tea, Grandma smiled proudly. "Rosie, you're ready. They'll never see this version of you coming." The morning of their return arrived with snow drifting lazily across the street. Normally, Christmas morning meant laughter, music, the smell of sugar cookies. Instead, the house was quiet, every decoration box still sealed in the attic. "They'll be home by dinner," Grandma said, glancing at her notes. By late afternoon, her friends began to arrive. Terry, the retired attorney, came first, her leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Everything's in order," she assured me, setting the repayment agreement on the table. Beth, the retired social worker, followed, offering a warm smile. "Don't let their tears fool you," she reminded me gently. "Guilt is just another weapon." Finally, Martin, the locksmith, dropped by to check the keypad and make sure the new locks were holding. "Just in case they try to force their way in," he muttered. By 6 o'clock, the living room was filled with an unlikely but fierce support team. Grandma, 3 of her bridge club friends, Terry, Beth, and Martin. A silver-haired army, united not by blood, but by principle. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my throat tightening with emotion. "Eleanor has always had our backs," Terry replied simply. "Now we have hers and yours." The 4 days leading up to my family's return were unlike any Christmas I had ever known. Instead of baking cookies and wrapping presents, Grandma Eleanor and I spent our time locking down the house, rehearsing strategies, and building what she liked to call an iron wall of boundaries. Every day had its checklist. By the second morning, the locks were changed, the valuables photographed and stored safely, and every shred of evidence, from the drained student loan account to the printed cruise itinerary, was organized neatly in folders. The refrigerator, once depressingly empty, was stocked with basics that Grandma and I paid for ourselves. On the third day, we focused entirely on what Grandma called emotional armor. "They'll come at you with guilt, tears, and anger," she warned as we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. "You need to respond with clarity, calm, and conviction." So we practiced, over and over. Grandma role-played as my father, pounding the table and barking, "I'm the head of this household. You don't tell me what to do." I answered evenly, "This isn't about control, it's about accountability. You signed an agreement when you took my money. Now there are consequences." She switched gears, suddenly adopting my mother's quivering voice. "Sweetheart, we just wanted one nice thing as a family. We were always going to pay you back." I steadied my breath. "If you meant to pay me back, you wouldn't have hidden it. Families don't steal from each other." Finally, she became Jacob, shrugging and muttering, "It's over, Ross. The money's gone. Stop making drama." I met her eyes firmly. "It's not over until every dollar is repaid. That's not drama. That's reality." The exercises felt ridiculous at first, but by the end of the day, I was answering with strength instead of hesitation. I could almost feel the old patterns loosening their grip on me. That night, as we sipped chamomile tea, Grandma smiled proudly. "Rosie, you're ready. They'll never see this version of you coming." The morning of their return arrived with snow drifting lazily across the street. Normally, Christmas morning meant laughter, music, the smell of sugar cookies. Instead, the house was quiet, every decoration box still sealed in the attic. "They'll be home by dinner," Grandma said, glancing at her notes. By late afternoon, her friends began to arrive. Terry, the retired attorney, came first, her leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Everything's in order," she assured me, setting the repayment agreement on the table. Beth, the retired social worker, followed, offering a warm smile. "Don't let their tears fool you," she reminded me gently. "Guilt is just another weapon." Finally, Martin, the locksmith, dropped by to check the keypad and make sure the new locks were holding. "Just in case they try to force their way in," he muttered. By 6 o'clock, the living room was filled with an unlikely but fierce support team. Grandma, 3 of her bridge club friends, Terry, Beth, and Martin. A silver-haired army, united not by blood, but by principle. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my throat tightening with emotion. "Eleanor has always had our backs," Terry replied simply. "Now we have hers and yours." The snow crunched under my boots as Grandma and I walked toward Magnolia Coffee, the local cafe 3 blocks away. Behind us, the rideshare van idled, my parents and siblings climbing reluctantly inside after agreeing to meet us there. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, but every step forward felt like claiming new ground. Magnolia Coffee was warm and inviting, decorated with garlands of pine and strings of white lights. A small tree glittered in the corner. The contrast between the cozy Christmas atmosphere and the storm brewing inside me was jarring. We chose a booth in the back. Terry, the retired attorney, slid in beside me, her leather portfolio resting on the table like a silent weapon. Grandma sat across from me, her posture regal despite her age. When the bell above the cafe door jingled, my family stepped inside, bringing with them a gust of cold air and tension so thick the barista glanced up nervously. Dad stomped to the booth first, his tanned face still flushed with anger. Mom followed, her expression a practiced mask of sweet confusion. Jacob shoved his hands into his hoodie pocket, looking irritated. Olivia trailed behind, her eyes darting between us with uncertainty. "This is ridiculous," Dad snapped as he slid into the booth opposite me. "We could have had this talk at the house." "No," I said firmly. "We're having it here. Neutral ground." Terry opened the portfolio and placed a thick document on the table. "This is a repayment agreement. It outlines exactly how you'll return the $9,876 withdrawn from Rosalind's account." Mom gasped, her voice high-pitched. "A contract? With family?" "Sweetheart, that's not necessary. We were always going to pay you back." "Then signing won't be a problem," Terry replied smoothly, her glasses glinting under the cafe lights. Dad's jaw tightened. "We didn't steal anything." "That was a family account. We had every right." I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. No, Dad, that was my student loan money. It was for my final semester, my clinicals, my exams. You didn't ask. You just took it. That's theft. The word landed like a hammer. Jacob shifted uncomfortably, staring at the table. Olivia bit her lip. Mom's eyes welled with tears, her voice trembling. Rosie, you're making this sound worse than it was. We just wanted one nice thing after such a hard year. You don't know the stress we've been under. I almost faltered. Almost. But Grandma's voice echoed in my mind. Love without limits creates monsters. I steadied my tone. Stress doesn't excuse stealing your daughter's future. You didn't just take money. You jeopardized everything I've worked for. Silence fell for a beat, broken only by the hiss of the espresso machine. Jacob finally muttered, What's done is done. The money's gone. You can't change that now. Terry leaned forward. That's why there's a repayment plan. Immediate payment from your flight refunds and the rest on a strict schedule. Failure to comply will result in legal action. Dad slammed a palm on the table, making the mugs rattle. Legal action? Against your own family? I met his glare without flinching. Family doesn't do what you did. If you refuse to sign, I'll file a police report and notify the loan provider. Fraud investigations don't end well. For the first time, Dad looked rattled. He turned to Mom. Did you know she could do that? Mom fiddled with a napkin. We didn't think it would come to this. Neither did I said softly, but you made that choice for me. Olivia finally spoke up, her voice quiet but clear. She's right. We took her money. It was wrong. The words seemed to hang in the air, shifting the balance. For once, it wasn't me saying it. It was one of them. Terry tapped the agreement. Immediate payment of $1,000 from your flight refunds. The rest in monthly installments with interest. Sign, and we move forward. Refuse, and Rosalind pursues other options. Dad flipped through the pages, muttering under his breath. Mom sniffled, dabbing her eyes. Jacob shook his head, but said nothing. Olivia's gaze met mine, filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. Finally, Mom reached for the pen. Her hand trembled as she signed. Jacob followed reluctantly. Olivia signed without hesitation. Dad was last, glaring at me like I was a stranger. This isn't over, he muttered as he scrawled his name. No, I said calmly, sliding the signed papers back to Terry. It's just beginning. When we stood to leave, the snow outside had thickened, coating the streets in white. My family trudged back toward the rideshare van, shoulders slumped. I walked beside Grandma, her arm linked with mine. You did it, she whispered. Did I asked, my breath fogging in the cold. She squeezed my arm. You stood up for yourself? That's more than any of them expected. That's the first step. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, stronger. The fight wasn't over, but for once, I was no longer fighting alone. The ride back from Magnolia Coffee was strangely silent. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, catching in the headlights of the rideshare van that carried my parents and siblings home. Grandma and I walked behind them, the crisp air filling my lungs like a reminder that something had shifted. Inside, the house felt different. Though not much had changed physically, the signed agreement in Terry's portfolio gave the space a new weight. For once, the power wasn't in my parents' hands, it was in mine. I gathered everyone in the living room, where the glow of a single lamp cast long shadows across undecorated walls. Before we settle in, I began, holding the signed papers. We need to talk about new rules. Things will not go back to how they were. Dad scoffed, dropping his suitcase with a heavy thud. Rules? This is our house. Grandma's voice cut in, calm but sharp. Correction, Harold. This is my house, purchased with the money from selling mine, which you promised to use responsibly, since you've proven otherwise. Rosalind will be helping manage it from now on. The silence that followed was thick and bitter. Mom's face flushed pink, Jacob looked annoyed, and Olivia glanced at me with something close to relief. I unfolded the agreement and placed it on the coffee table. First, I said steadily, repayment starts now, immediate deposit from your flight refunds. We'll track every payment, miss one, and legal action follows. Jacob muttered, this feels like punishment. No, I corrected, meeting his eyes. It's accountability. There's a difference. Mom tried her gentle voice again, the one she always used when she wanted to soften me. Rosie, sweetheart, don't you think you're being a little harsh? We're family. I took a deep breath, feeling the steadiness of Grandma beside me. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't jeopardize someone's future. From now on, my trust has to be earned. I walked them through the rest of the rules. Grandma's Social Security checks would be deposited directly into her personal account, not handled by my parents. Temporary entry codes for the new locks would be issued, but permanent access would be withheld until progress on repayment was made. Household bills would be shared openly, documented in a binder Grandma had already started. No more late fees hidden away or relying on me to quietly cover gaps. Spending transparency would be required. Any major purchases needed to be logged. Dad's jaw worked furiously. "This is insane. You're turning our home into a prison." "No," I said softly but firmly. "I'm turning it into a place where respect means something." Grandma nodded. "And if you don't like it, Harold, you know the alternative. Doors stay locked. Consequences remain in place." The tension in the room was suffocating. For years, they had all expected me to bend, to forgive, to excuse. But the papers on the table and the locks on the door said otherwise. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. "I think this is fair," she said quietly. "We've been unfair to Rosie for years. Maybe this is what we need." Her words seemed to hang in the air, impossible for the rest of them to ignore. Mom's eyes flicked toward her, as if shocked that one of her own children had stepped out of line. Dad's face softened slightly, though pride kept him from admitting anything. After that, no one argued further. They signed the immediate transfer from their flight refund, wiring the first $1,000 into my account that evening. Jacob grumbled, but followed through. Even Dad, muttering under his breath, clicked submit on his banking app while glaring at me across the room. When the confirmation pinged on my phone, something inside me loosened. For the first time in years, they had given instead of taken. That night, as the house grew quiet, I stood in the kitchen staring at the signed agreement taped to the refrigerator. The very spot where Mom's careless note had once sat now held the contract that symbolized the shift. From betrayal to accountability, from exploitation to boundaries. Grandma came up beside me, her hand warm on my shoulder. "It feels strange now," she said softly. "But you'll see, this is the only way forward." I nodded. "It doesn't feel like home anymore." Her eyes twinkled with a kind of sad wisdom. "That's because home isn't about walls or decorations, Rosie. It's about people, and right now, you're teaching these people how to be a family again." I looked at the fridge one last time, at the contract that was both a shield and a promise. My future wasn't just mine anymore, it was protected. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a doormat. I felt like the one in control. The first few nights after the coffee shop showdown were tense. My parents kept mostly to their room, sulking. Jacob stayed glued to his headphones, avoiding eye contact. Olivia, though, quietly helped me cook and clean, trying to bridge the silence that settled over the house like a heavy fog. The signed repayment agreement taped to the refrigerator was a constant reminder. Every time Dad walked past it, he scowled. Every time Mom glanced at it, her lips tightened. But neither dared take it down. Grandma made sure of that. The very next week, their first payment cleared, $1,000 from their flight refund and the sale of a few cruise souvenirs. It wasn't much compared to the full $9, $876, but it was something. Proof that this time, things were different. For me, it was life-saving. With Grandma's temporary loan covering the tuition gap and the repayment beginning, I was able to register for my final clinical rotations. On the first day back at school in Chicago, I nearly cried when I saw my name on the list. I hadn't lost everything after all. Small shifts began. The weeks that followed were awkward, but change crept in quietly. Dad picked up weekend consulting work, something he had always dismissed before as beneath him. Mom sold piles of unused household items online and cut back her shopping trips. Jacob surprised me most. He downloaded a budgeting app and started talking about taking his music production jobs more seriously. Olivia kept reaching out, even calling me privately when I went back to Chicago. "I'm proud of you," she whispered one night. "I think I needed to see you stand up to them to realize I can too." It wasn't smooth. Old habits die hard. A month later, Mom tried dipping into the repayment fund to buy something on sale. I caught it immediately, and for the first time in my life, I didn't let it slide. I called her out, firmly. She cried, said I was being cruel. I repeated what Grandma had drilled into me. Consequences aren't cruelty, they're clarity. She never tried again. Graduation day. 6 months later, I stood in my white nursing uniform, diploma in hand, the Chicago skyline glinting behind me. Grandma was in the front row, tears in her eyes, clapping harder than anyone else. My parents came too, subdued but present, and when the dean called my name, even Dad stood. After the ceremony, Mom hugged me tightly. "We're proud of you, Rosie," she said, her voice small. I wanted to believe it wasn't just words. By then, nearly half of the stolen money had been repaid. Not perfectly, not without arguments, but steadily. And that steadiness was something new for them. A different Christmas. The following December, the house looked almost unfamiliar in its simplicity. No over-the-top spending, no giant pile of gifts bought on credit. Just a modest dinner, thoughtful presents, and miracle of miracles, decorations put up early. This time, I wasn't the only one who saved for it. Jacob chipped in for groceries. Olivia bought Grandma a handmade quilt. Even Dad surprised me by paying for the electricity bill on time without complaint. We sat around the tree on Christmas Eve, the first one since the betrayal. There was still a distance between us, a cautiousness in how we spoke. But it was more honest. I didn't feel like a doormat anymore. I felt like an equal, someone whose boundaries were finally respected. At one point, Grandma leaned over and whispered, "See? This is what love looks like when it's mixed with respect." The ripple effect. The lessons from that terrible Christmas didn't just reshape my family, they reshaped me. As a new nurse, I carried them into my work. I recognized patterns of enabling in families of patients. I saw mothers sacrificing their own health for ungrateful children, siblings drained by one another's irresponsibility. I could speak with empathy because I knew what it felt like to be used, and I knew the courage it took to say no. My patients didn't just get medical care from me. They got compassion rooted in hard-earned wisdom. Grandma's legacy. Grandma eventually moved part-time to Chicago, renting a small apartment a few blocks from the hospital. We shared dinners, laughed over old stories, and kept each other accountable. She often reminded me, it's never too late to change the story of a family. She was right. She had once enabled Dad's worst habits, but by standing beside me, she helped break that cycle. It wasn't easy for her to admit her mistakes, but she did, and that honesty gave me strength. Looking back, sometimes I think about that note on the refrigerator, the one written so casually as if stealing $10,000 was nothing. That note nearly shattered me, but in the end, it became the spark that rebuilt me. It taught me that love without boundaries is just exploitation. That accountability, though painful, can be the most loving act of all. And that sometimes, the best Christmas gift isn't under a tree. It's the courage to say, no more. A year later, my family wasn't perfect. They still stumbled, still resisted, still tried to slide back into old habits. But the difference was clear. They knew now that I wouldn't bend, wouldn't excuse, wouldn't sacrifice my future for their whims. And for the first time, they respected me for it. This story isn't just about money. It's about boundaries. Sometimes the people closest to us will take advantage of our kindness until we say enough. Real love isn't about letting others use you. Real love is about accountability, respect, and the courage to stand your ground, even with family. Have you ever had to stand up to your own family when they crossed the line? What gave you the strength to do it? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this story touched you, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that their worth isn't measured by what others take from them. Remember, the most loving thing you can sometimes say is no more.